The storm had broken over the city with a violence that made even the streetlights flicker, and as the rain hammered down in heavy sheets, a lone figure in a tailored black coat stepped out of his car. Adrian Hale, known in the business world as the coldest, most unreachable CEO in the region, moved with his usual practiced indifference through the downpour, unfazed by the chaos of weather or the world around him. But just as he reached the entrance of his corporate tower, a sudden shape caught his eye, a small, shivering form huddled beside the concrete pillar of the building, barely visible in the curtain of rain. His instinct was to ignore it. His entire life had been built around ignoring the unnecessary. Yet something made him look again, and what he saw stopped him in a way that no business deal, no collapse of markets, no life-threatening pressure had ever managed to do. There, under the icy rain, sat a young woman, drenched, trembling and clutching a thin blanket around a tiny baby she was trying desperately to feed. Her clothes were soaked and clinging to her fragile frame. Her hair, plastered against her face, dripped as though the storm itself had chosen to drown her. And the baby, impossibly small, whimpered in her arms quietly, weakly like. It had already learned that crying was a luxury it could no longer afford. It was a moment too raw, too real, too fragile to fit into Adrian's rigid world of numbers, contracts and emotional distance. Against his will, the scene anchored him to the pavement, and somewhere deep inside the hardened walls he had built over decades, something shifted, something he did not yet understand. If you're watching this and believe the world still needs kindness, second chances, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps stories like this reach more hearts. For most people, seeing a struggling mother under the rain might have evoked pity. For Adrian, it evoked memory he spent years burying. Because once, long ago, he had been the helpless one. Once, he too had known what it felt like to be unwanted, cold, and forgotten by the world. His mother had worked 3 jobs, often falling asleep in cheap diners just to feed him. He had watched her break piece by piece until she had nothing left to give. He had promised himself he would never be weak again, that he would never rely on anyone, never feel anything deep enough to destroy him. It was that promise that built his empire, and that same promise that had turned him into a man who walked past pain without blinking. But the sight before him now felt like seeing his childhood reflected in a shattered mirror, only this time the helplessness belonged to someone else, and for a reason he couldn't name. He couldn't walk away. The woman's hands trembled so hard that even holding the baby's small bottle steady seemed like an impossible task. Her lips were pale, almost blue, and her blank, exhausted eyes stared at the infant with a mixture of fierce love and complete defeat. She looked like someone who had been strong for far too long. She looked like someone who had already lost everything except the tiny life she refused to give up on. The storm worsened, as if mocking them both, and the thunder rolled over the buildings like warning drums. Adrian could have continued inside. He could have left her to the police, or the security guard, or the city shelters. But something inside him whispered that if he walked away now, he would carry the image of that mother and child with him for the rest of his life. He found himself moving toward her without conscious decision, driven by a force he didn't understand. The closer he got, the more painfully clear her condition became. Her shoes were missing one sole. Her fingers were scraped, as if she'd fallen repeatedly. The baby's blanket was threadbare, and not nearly warm enough for weather like this. She looked like someone who had been pushed from safety to danger, from stability to survival, in a matter of days. And Adrian, though he did not know her story yet, sensed instinctively that this wasn't someone who chose to be here. This was someone the world had chewed up and left behind. As the minutes passed, the storm continued to rage, but the woman didn't move. Her small shoulder jerked now and then from cold. She looked down at her baby with a heartbreakingly tender expression, whispering something through chattering teeth. It was a gesture so intimate, so instinctively protective, that it pierced Adrian's carefully guarded heart. He wondered how long she'd been there, how long she'd been walking in the rain, how long she'd been pretending she wasn't breaking apart. The city around them kept moving, cars passing, umbrellas bobbing, strangers rushing past without noticing. But in that moment, for Adrian, the world had narrowed into only 2 beating hearts, one fragile, and one refusing to give up on it. He didn't speak. He didn't ask questions. He simply offered the smallest lifeline, his coat, heavy and warm, draping it over her shoulders before she even realized someone was near. She flinched as though expecting punishment. When she finally registered the act of kindness, her expression shifted in a way that hit him harder than he expected. She looked confused, overwhelmed, and almost afraid to accept that someone was helping her. That small reaction alone told him everything. She had not been shown kindness in a very long time. He stayed with her under the downpour, not out of obligation, not out of pity, but out of an invisible thread he could not unravel. Something in him whispered that his path and hers were not crossing by accident. What Adrian didn't know, what he couldn't possibly guess yet, was that the young woman had once been exactly where he stood, secure, hopeful, dreaming of a future. Her name was Ella, and just months ago she had been married, employed, and expecting her baby with joy. But life, as it often does, tore her world apart. First, her husband fell critically ill, draining their savings. Then she lost her job when she couldn't juggle hospital visits and long shifts. Then she lost her home after falling behind on rent. After her husband passed away, she had no one left. Her family had died years earlier. Friends drifted away. The world she thought she understood collapsed beneath her feet. But she held on to one thing, hope, that she could still save her baby, even if she couldn't save herself. After giving birth, she had been living in shelters, then in temporary rooms, then in cheap motels when she could afford it. But when her last few bills were stolen from her bag 2 nights ago, she had been forced onto the streets with nothing but her infant daughter and her determination. The past 48 hours had been a blur of exhaustion, hunger, fear, and endless walking through the cold. She had gone to 5 different shelters, but none had space. She had knocked on church doors only to find them closed due to the storm. She had fed her baby the last of the formula hours before Adrian found her. She had nothing left. Not even dry clothes, not even strength to stand. But in that moment, under the rain, when a stranger silently placed his coat around her, something inside her flickered a tiny flame of belief that maybe, just may, the world hadn't fully given up on her. Adrian guided her inside the lobby of his building, not caring that he was soaking wet, or that he carried in someone the world might have judged harshly. His staff stared, confused, unsure how to respond to their infamously icy boss showing humanity. But he ignored their curiosity. The woman needed warmth, safety, and help, not judgment. The hours that followed were quiet and heavy with meaning. He arranged for towels, blankets, medical attention for the baby, warm food, and a safe room for her to rest, all while she kept her eyes on her child, as if afraid they might be taken from her. She never asked who he was. She never assumed anything. She only whispered a broken thank you that made Adrian feel a strange ache he hadn't felt in years. When the doctor examined the baby and confirmed she was weaker than she should be, cold, underfed, but thankfully stable, Adrian felt an unexpected surge of protectiveness. He had never been responsible for anyone before. He had never wanted to be. Yet here he was, unable to imagine walking away. That night, he stayed in his office longer than usual, staring out the window as the storm began to calm. He couldn't shake the image of the woman and her child alone in the rain. He couldn't stop thinking about the life she must have lived to end up there. He couldn't stop wondering why, out of everyone in the city, she was the one fate placed in front of him. He didn't believe in destiny, but he believed in moments, rare, life-altering moments that cracked open the walls we build around ourselves. And he knew, deep in his gut, that this was one of them. In the days that followed, he found himself doing things he never imagined. He visited the room where she and her baby were staying. He made sure they had meals, clothes, medical supplies. He even arranged for a social worker to find shelter options for her. But each time he saw her, sitting quietly with her baby in her arms, he felt that same indescribable pull. She didn't ask for anything. She didn't complain. She never spoke about her struggle unless asked. She simply held her baby close and radiated a strength that humbled him. And piece by piece, the cold CEO began to thaw. He started noticing things he had long overlooked, like how lonely his penthouse felt, how empty his evenings were, how success had filled his bank accounts but hollowed his soul. He realized that the warmth he felt when the baby reached for his finger, or when the mother gave him a grateful, gentle smile, was something he had never experienced from any achievement. He wanted to help them, not for the sake of charity, not for the sake of obligation, but because he felt alive around them. Because he had stopped being numb. As the week went on, their connection deepened in quiet, natural ways. She healed slowly. He softened quietly. The baby grew stronger, and for the first time in years, Adrian felt like he was becoming someone his mother would have been proud of. If this story has touched your heart, even a little, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your engagement helps spread these emotional stories to more people who might need them. One evening, as the baby slept, and the city lights reflected softly through the windows, Adrian felt an emotion he had long forgotten: peace. And when Ella looked at him with teary eyes, finally brave enough to share the full story of how she had lost everything but hope, he realized something profound. He hadn't saved her. She had saved him just as much. She had brought compassion back into his world. She had reminded him of the boy who once believed in goodness. She had awakened the man he thought he'd buried under ambition. And as she sat there, still wearing the quiet resilience that defined her. He understood that helping her find a new life wasn't an act of kindness, it was fate. Before the ending, please comment below. Hope is stronger than anything. In the months that followed, Adrian helped Ella rebuild her life, new home, new opportunities, stability for her child. But what neither of them expected was how naturally their lives intertwined. What started as a rescue became friendship. What became friendship grew into something deeper, something healing for both broken hearts. And what began under a cold, merciless storm slowly bloomed into a future warmed by love, trust, and second chances. Because sometimes the people we are meant to find appear in the rain when everything seems lost, just to show us that hope, no matter how fragile, is always worth holding on to. And the cold CEO who once walked past pain without blinking became the man who held close the very souls who saved him.